Sri Lanka's economy experienced a severe contraction of 7.8% in 2022, marking the worst such downturn since the country gained independence in 1948. This contraction was a consequence of a multitude of factors, including the COVID-19 pandemic, the war in Ukraine, and economic mismanagement by the government. Inflation in Sri Lanka is at a current rate of 17.5% and is projected to climb to 20% in the coming months. The depreciation of the Sri Lankan rupee and the increased cost of imported goods contribute to this high inflation rate, along with governmental economic mismanagement. The country's foreign exchange reserves have dwindled to $2.3 billion, sufficient only to cover a single month of imports. This decrease in reserves is a result of declining tourism, the war in Ukraine, and economic mismanagement. For the first time in its history, Sri Lanka has defaulted on its foreign debt. This default was prompted by a variety of factors, including the decline in foreign exchange reserves, an increase in borrowing costs, and the government's economic mismanagement. The Sri Lankan populace is now grappling with a severe food shortage, a consequence of the country's economic crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the war in Ukraine. Food prices have risen by 50% in the past year. According to the World Food Programme, WFP, approximately 6.3 million people in Sri Lanka, which is about 27% of the country's population, are uncertain about their next meal. The WFP estimates that about 3.5 million people in Sri Lanka are currently grappling with acute food insecurity. This figure is expected to rise to 5.7 million by the year's end. Sri Lanka is also contending with a fuel shortage, with long lines appearing at gas stations. The country is likewise experiencing a power outage crisis, with power cuts lasting up to 12 hours a day. This has caused schools to close, disrupting the education of millions of children. The healthcare system in Sri Lanka is under considerable strain. Hospitals are running out of essential medicines and medical supplies, and this strain is exacerbated by the economic crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the war in Ukraine. Sri Lanka's recovery from the current economic crisis is anticipated to take several years, with the timeline heavily dependent on the government's ability to implement reforms, the availability of international assistance, and the global economic outlook.